This lecture is going to be about adolescents and their family relationships. So we're going to be talking about systems theory, relationships with parents, and also parenting style. So the first topic is systems theory. And the main idea behind this theory is that we need to look at the big picture. And this is going to be a recurring theme that we see throughout the semester. As we study adolescents, we want to look at them through this systems theory lens because families are interconnected. We can't really isolate a teenager and be able to study them completely on their own because we know that every part of the family works together. So when we're looking at an adolescent, maybe that's having some problem behavior. You can't just say, well, this is the problem child and this is, causing all the problems in our family. Because all of the people in that system are affecting each other. And so when we look at each member of the system, we know that they influence everyone else in the family and they are influenced by those people as well. So we would look at things like the parents' relationship and the job status and things like sibling relationships and even things like the school environment or things like that. So it was really just kind of taking the focus off of one person individually and looking at the big picture of what is contributing to all of these different factors that work all together. They're all interconnected. So that's how we want to look at families when we're studying really any child or adolescent or even an adult. We want to look at all the different factors that work together. So here's one way of looking at family systems theory. There's a lot of different parts to it. This is just one kind of chart that we like to use to show these two different levels. So we have cohesion across the top, which is closeness. And then we have flexibility that's going up and down the side. So when we look at cohesion, on the left there, you see that it's low cohesion. So these are disengaged. So these types of families are really independent. They don't spend a lot of time together. They're all kind of just doing their own thing. They're very separated. And then on the opposite end of that would be an enmeshed family, who is just what you would imagine the opposite of disengaged is. Enmeshed families are always together. They are extremely close. They don't spend any time with anyone outside of the family because the family is always together. So as you can see, anything in the orange category is unbalanced. So anytime you get too far to one side or the other, that kind of starts to make an unhealthy kind of pattern. So you might think that close families are great, which yes, they absolutely are. But being able to find that balance between the family being cohesive and then people having their independence. So definitely somewhere in the middle on both of these scales is going to be the most balanced way to be. Then we have flexibility. And these are things like the rules, people's roles, who does what in the family, kind of the belief system. The families that are on the bottom are rigid. So they're very set in their ways and everything needs to be the same. They're strict. They don't change. They're just because they're at the bottom, they're not very flexible. Then at the top of that would be chaotic. And that's sort of this when everything is changing all the time and there's no predictability, no schedule, no structure. So things are kind of just going crazy all the time. And there's nothing that you can really rely on. So again, somewhere in the middle where we see this flexible to structured area is the most balanced and healthy way to be. So as you can see, the purple is the balanced, and there are purple in each of the four quadrants. So you can definitely be on one side or the other and still be in that balanced and healthy range. And as I've been explaining this, you're probably thinking about your own family. So I kind of want you to picture your own family and where you might fall on this chart so you can kind of relate it to your real life, and think about, Is my family really, really close, or are we very independent? Maybe we're somewhere in the middle. Same thing on the flexibility side. Just kind of see what you're used to. And then maybe what you would want for your family in the future if you wanted to make some changes in these two scales. So this is just one way of looking at, when we look at an adolescent, we want to think about things like this so that this would go, contribute to whatever the adolescent is doing, how their personality is, kind of maybe why they act the way that they do. So when we talk about relationship with parents, one of the most stereotypical times of our life is adolescence. And we like to think in our culture about teenagers as always fighting with their parents, they're rebellious, it's these horrible years that nobody knows how to get through. Teenagerhood is, it's stressful for a lot of people to even think about it. You dread the day when your kids are teenagers because it's going to be so difficult. But in reality, most families don't really have that extreme circumstances in their homes with their adolescents. I mean, of course, there's going to be some tension because we are trying to balance that independence with the closeness. And that gets hard during the teen years. But for the most part, the parents and teens, the things that they are fighting about is just kind of the little day-to-day things that really aren't that important when you really think about it. Did you pick up your dirty socks? Did you do your homework? Did you make it to school on time? Things like that, which are sort of just these little scheduling things or housekeeping type of things, which can, when you add them all up, make things into kind of a bigger fight than they need to be. But we kind of try to look at adolescence in a more positive way. And typically, the parents and teens do have similar beliefs when it comes down to the things that are really very important, their core values, their morals, things like that. And teens do go through these times of trying to test things and figure out who they are and all of that. But for the most part, those stereotypes aren't necessarily correct. So in the teenage years, a lot of times teenagers kind of pull away. They want their independence. They're spending a lot more time with their friends. Their friends become very important during these years. So the thing for parents to remember is just to try to stay connected because they do still need their parents at this stage. So the relationship can change and we can allow that autonomy. We can allow a little bit of change of roles and things like that because, teenagers are starting to be able to drive themselves places. They can, take care of themselves physically. They get their own job and then they have their own money, so there's definitely a lot of things that change during these years. But the most important thing is just that emotional connection needs to stay as close as it always has been. You don't want to pull away just because your teenager starts to gain some independence. So it's definitely a hard balance. It's not something that comes easily. Sometimes it takes a little trial and error to figure out where those boundaries need to happen, but staying emotionally connected is really important during the teen years because all the research pretty much is similar in saying that the teenagers really do have happier and healthier adolescent years when their parents are close. When they feel like their parents are there for them, they just have a lot better outcomes. So as much as they might try to push you away and say they don't want you there, they really do need you there. And that's when you have the best outcomes for adolescents, is when their parents are connected to them. So that brings us to our last topic, which is parenting styles. And these styles were first kind of introduced by Diana Baumrind, and you've probably heard of them if you've taken any kind of child development or family classes. This is a very popular model, which we use across all ages. We could talk about a toddler and a baby all the way up to, even adult children. So basically, this is another scale like we looked at before, but there's the two things that we're looking at here is our demandingness and responsiveness. So responsiveness is going to be love and warmth and the kind of emotional side of, being together and communicating and, just those types of things, having fun together and really the emotional connection that you have. So we can see we've got the extreme on the low or on the high of responsiveness. And then the other scale is demandingness. So that would include things like rules and structure, expectations, things like that. So the idea here is that we actually want to be high on both. So this is a little different from the other one that we talked about where we wanted to be kind of in the middle. On this one, we want to be high on demandingness and we want to be high on responsiveness. So we want to be in this top right, which is the green, and it's called authoritative. The reason why is just because we've seen from, decades of research that children who have these types of parents just really have the best outcomes. They do better in school, they're better socially, they have more friends, self-esteem wise, they do better just in their lives in general. They're more successful, and they have this kind of secure base that they're building on from their parents being high in love and warmth and all those responsiveness things, but they also have high expectations and rules and a structure and things like that. So when we look at this orange type, which is authoritarian, so they are very high on the demandingness. They have all the rules and they're strict and they have a schedule, but they're lacking in the responsiveness. So you can kind of see your own, your own self or your own parents in these different types, and maybe see, my dad was really great about communicating, but not about setting boundaries or rules or something like that. So be thinking about your own experiences as we're talking about these types. So the authoritarian parents would be very structured, very rigid. There's not a lot of communication back and forth, so they don't really allow for the kids to maybe help set the rules or explain why something's happening, whereas authoritative parents would be a lot more flexible in that. So they do have high expectations, but it's within the realm of being flexible with those. So maybe we base something on circumstances. Okay, your curfew is usually midnight, but because it's prom night tonight, it's a very special occasion, it only happens once or twice in your lifetime, we're going to let you stay out later. That would be an authoritative decision because they're being flexible about a rule, but they're still keeping some type of guideline. So then we look at the bottom, which is the low on the demandingness. So this bottom right is indulgent. So these are very high on the love and warmth and responsiveness, but they're low on the rules and structure. So these would be very spoiled type of kids. Maybe the kids run the show. They kind of do whatever they want. Their parents just give them whatever they want. They just dote on them. They have, the fancy cars and they can kind of stay out all night because their parents don't expect them to follow the rules. And maybe it's because they're trying to avoid a confrontation. They don't want to upset the teenager. So this is where the kid is kind of in charge. But the parents do love them very much, and they want what's best for them, but maybe they're a little more too much in that being the best friend type of thing. And then finally on the bottom left is indifferent. This has low on both, so low demanding and low on the responsiveness. So these would be parents who are just uninvolved. There's not a lot of communication. There's no rules, but there's also not a lot of warmth. There's maybe the kid's home alone all the time. That they don't know what's going on in their child's life. They don't really care very much. Things like that. So again, the top right is where we want to be. We want to be high on demandingness and high on responsiveness. And it is difficult to find that balance. But again, these types of kids who come from these homes where they have authoritative parents, it's just been shown again and again how successful they are when compared to some of these other types. So definitely study these types, think about your own life. And as we look at adolescence, this is one of the important aspects of the family relationship. So that's it for this family lecture. Let me know if you have any questions.